In this video, we'll discuss eye coloring in relation to face reading and the associated ideas worth considering. Enjoy.
In today's face reading tutorial, we're going to talk about eye coloring in relation to face reading and its relationship to the 5 elements. So, first and foremost, if you're new to my channel, welcome, but please go up here and watch the 5-minute crash course face reading video. If you've never seen a face reading, you've never watched any of my tutorials, I really encourage you to go watch that. It's only 5 minutes, but it gives you foundational ideas, terminology, and what face reading is and isn't. So I really encourage you to go watch that if you are new. So let's talk about eye coloring in relation to the 5 elements. For review, fire, earth, metal, water, and wood are known as the 5 elements. These are 5 phases in the natural world that human beings have been dependent upon since the beginning. And because we are an extension of the natural world and we reciprocate energy with these elements, they're a part of us and we're a part of them. It's a two-way street. So they show up in our features. They show up in our face. They show up in our rhythms. So that's one, 5-element theory. The second idea that we're going to go over is something called elemental density, sort of the weight or the impact of the elements in the natural world and how that relates to eye coloring. And it gives you sort of a symbolic representation of how to understand this idea a bit better. So let's talk about this. I'm going to put this chart up here that I made. This is the 5 elements with the elemental density and the eye coloring associations with the elements. So let's talk about the elemental density first. At the bottom is water. Most of the planet is water. If you look at the numbers, it's anywhere from 70 to 80% of the planet, and water is very heavy. And moreover, if you go into the depths of the ocean, it is a black abyss, dark coloring essentially down in the depths of the ocean. Now, above that in terms of density is wood. Wood is firm. Think of a redwood tree. It's very easy to make the case for the density of wood. Then when we get to earth, I really want you to think about soil. I want you to think about dirt, how it has material form, but it's relatively light compared to wood and water, but still has some weight, right? There's still some material in there. And then we move into metal. Now, metal is a bit of an enigma. They call the metal element the enigmatic element. And it's because it has these ties to form and formlessness. And I'm not going to do a deep dive into metal, but the thing I want you to think about is the symbol of metal. Mountains ascend towards the heavens, and the higher they get, the thinner the air gets, and the more we move into and bridge into the immaterial energy of the heavens. So classically, they talk about earth being yin and of form, and heaven being of energy and yang. So metal is ascending and climbs upward towards the heavens. This is why metal has ties to divinity. It has ties to creativity and transcendence, transcendent emotions and transcending things. This is about the metal energy because it's moving towards that yang heavenly energy. And moreover, the metal element also reflects light. So this is where we start to see this relationship between light hitting metal and metal becoming brighter or moving that light into different areas. If you think of a mirror, it's the polished metal, right? In the human world, it bounces light into different areas. And that ability to move light is why it sits higher at the elemental chart. Even though it's firm and of form, it has this dialogue with the immaterial. And then fire, lastly, is immaterial. Fire is definitely there, but you can't grab it and you can't touch it, but it gives off the most light. So this sort of starts to make the case for the eye coloring. So again, if we go just with the eye coloring range, the black eyes or really deep dark brown are considered watery eyes, deep dark watery eyes. Now, when we start moving into those browns that are noticeably brown, they're no longer black or kind of, brown black. That's where we start moving into the wood energy. And then when we get into those green eyes, that's wood energy, okay? Green trees, green foliage, think of it like that. When we get into earth, we're getting into the lighter colored eyes that sit between the heavy dense elements of water and wood and the sort of more immaterial elements of metal and fire. Earth sits in the middle just like the classical representation. Earth sits in the middle. Now, for reference, I have earth-colored eyes. This is where you start to see brown eyes usually, or earth, those darker, denser element colors with a little bit of light coming to the forefront. So if you look at my eyes in the sunlight, they have sort of a creamy brown, and if you get bright light, they almost have a green component to them. So that kind of hazel energy sits right at the earth level. When we start getting into the blues and the super light, crisp, icy blues, that's where we move into metal and fire. So you can say that like metal and those blue eyes are a mixture, I would say. It really depends, but it's kind of a mixture of like metal and fire. But again, blue, and then the icier blue and the more light those eyes get, the lighter they are in coloring, then we're looking at fire. So you want to think about this from the elemental perspective and the density perspective. If you have those two things on the forefront, this gives you a framework for how the elements are expressing in your eyes. Now, that being said, the eyes are the gateway and the portal to the soul. So you want to think of eye coloring as highlights to your fire element. A lot of our fire is seen through the eyes, a lot. It's seen through our wrinkling and through dimples, and when we smile, that's all fire energy, but the epicenter is the eyes. So when we see that, okay, when you have that, you want to overlay this idea that the coloring of your eyes are highlights to the spirit, like highlight points to your spiritual expression. That's what the eyes represent. So eye coloring sort of gives you these metrics. When you look at a person, they've got all these watery features, they've got all these things, but then they have electric blue eyes that are like super icy and almost white, right? That really light blue. You're like, this person, while they have a lot of water metrics, they also have some very strong fire dynamics in their spirit. That's where you want to start to pay attention to it. And if the person has green eyes, you're going to think, okay, they've got some more wood metrics and those lower, denser elements in the picture. The other thing to think about is you'll notice here is that water is at the bottom of this chart and fire sits at the top. Classically, when we look at the yin-yang symbol, this is the way it represents. It's that the yang is at the top, the white portion, the white fish, is at the top, and at the bottom is the dark fish or the black. So you think black represents the water and fire represents the top. Water at the bottom, fire at the top. And the yin-yang symbol is symbolically, archetypally, about the dialogue between fire and water. That's what it is. In the body, that means bioelectricity and blood and fluid. This relationship, so even in this chart, you'll see the polar oppositions are water and fire. So I want you to think about these things when you're considering face reading and you're looking at someone or you're looking at yourself. Think of the eye coloring. Once you have this elemental chart sort of, to memory, you want to think the eye coloring is highlights to the spirit dynamics of a person. And that means that at the spirit level, you'll want to tune into these rhythms a bit more in relation to your spirit. So the spirit is the fire element, right? That's the big umbrella. And then if you have super icy blue eyes, that means even more fire energy. If you have, eyes that are very dark black, you're thinking within the context of your fire energy, there's also some very deep water metrics. So once you understand that, then you go and you look it up. You watch my videos. You read Lillian's book. You get into these things where you want to think about face reading as signposts on where to go. So as you're learning face reading, you'll get these ideas, you'll think about them, and then it's like, okay, now that I know that my eyes carry wood or they carry some earth, then you go and study the earth elements. And it's better that way to have big, rounded, soft edge, kind of permeable ideas than things that fit into a hard defined box, because when you get into a hard defined box, we're getting into locked linear science, and that's not what face reading is. It's definitely an art. So these are the big ideas to consider regarding eye coloring. If you have questions, please put them down below. And as always, thanks for your time.